Thank you for your purchase of your Yukon XT fish trap. This assembly process will be the same for the Ice Team Yukon XT series as well. So when you first get it, you're gonna have your big box. We're gonna open it up, we're gonna dive in and see what's inside. All right, once we have pulled the shelter out of the box, we're gonna go through our parts, see that everything's here. So first things first is our seats. These are your bottoms. There's gonna be 2 of them, along with your backs for your seats. There's gonna be 2 of them. Okay, from there, we will grab our seat rail or our rail support. And then our 2 deluxe seats. Okay, and then our tent. One thing to note with our tents is the hammocks. Your hammocks for your seating system will be inside with the tent. Now these are right under the white piece of paper. Also something you'll notice if you have hammocks that do come with your fish house, you will see an orange sticker on the outside of the bag telling you where the hammocks are. From there, we've got our spreader pole kit. We have our rope, our U-channel, and last but not least, our inner pack. Okay, and also your hoop poles will be attached down to the bottom of the base. And one thing to note here, you have an extension pole, okay? When you get your hoops and you pull them out, your extension pole is going to have a lime green zip tie. That is going to identify that is the extension. Also, a way you can identify it is the shortest hoop pole of the 4. All right, and then we got our base and we're ready to rock and roll. All right, so now that we have everything out of the ice house, we're gonna start with the inner pack. This is gonna be your main brain of your entire fish house. So open it up quick. All right, now as you can see, we've got all of our internal parts that we're gonna need to build this fish house. First thing we're gonna do is go through them. So first things first on the top is your RPS X clips. These are gonna be used on your hoop poles. We will use this at a later point. Okay, next is gonna be your seat assembly parts. So as you notice in here, you're gonna have a set of slide blocks. There's gonna be circular slide blocks and oval slide blocks. And you're gonna wanna find both of those. So we've got our circulars and our ovals. We're gonna put this off to the side for the seat assembly. And our L brackets for our seat assembly. So you should have 4 of them. There'll be 2 per each seat. All right, and then what we'll do is we will look for these. These are gonna be part number 101652. You're gonna have 4 of these. These are gonna be your rails for your seat system. So you're gonna wanna make sure you find those. And a good way to identify what they are is if you'll notice here, there's just 1 hole on each side, and they are your shorter aluminum poles out of the system. So there's our 4. All right, and from there, we'll move on to our front retainer brackets. Your front retainer brackets, you should have 2 of them. And also your rear retainer brackets. There should be 2 more as well. All right, and then we will have our tube plugs. We will need these for our seat rails, our sliding system. We'll have 2 seat swivels. We'll have our hardware. Okay, and then moving on to the other side of it, you will have your bent straight canopies. There'll be 2 of these. Okay, and then our canopy straight poles, which there should be a total of 6. So we got those. Okay, our hoop extensions. These will be used later on in the process. Okay, our rail support brackets, 2 of those. Our hinges that will be used later on those extensions I just spoke about. Okay. Our front pole brackets. And last but not least, our rail support plugs. From there, that is all the parts we're going to need for this shelter to have it built. Now we can start with the seat assembly. This seat assembly will be the same assembly for a variety of our fish houses, which I have listed up here in the corner. And from there, we'll get started and get to step 1. All right, so now that we got everything set out, let's get started with the seat assembly process. The tools that we're gonna want for this are a rubber mallet, a 3/8 inch wrench or socket, a 7/16 wrench or socket, some type of a pliers, a Allen wrench, which the Allen wrench will be included within the hardware kit. Otherwise, you can use a T-handle, and that size is going to be a 5/32. Okay, and then what we will want from there is some type of a silicone spray. You can do this if you would like. What it'll do is it'll allow the seats to slide even smoother than they do. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the tube seat rails and the tube plugs in together. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can take it, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to line up the holes in the tube plug with the holes on the tube rail. So I like to line them up, and one thing you can do is give them a push, or if you would like to use a rubber mallet, I like to just get those somewhat close to each other where they're close. Take this and pound it into place. Now we're going to do this for all 4 of them. So a little tip for you, once you get your tube plug into your rail, sometimes they're not always going to line up perfectly, okay? So what I like to do is take the Allen wrench from your hardware kit and go on the inside and just simply turn it to straighten it out. That way, everything will be in line how you need it to be when you assemble. All right, so next process is the extrusion channels. You will have slide blocks. You'll have one that is oval, and you'll have one that is circular. Now, when assembling this, you will want to make sure that you have one circular and one oval slide block on each one of these extrusion channels. So what we'll do is, you'll see a T that is notched in there, and you will line that up with the T on the extrusion channel and simply put, slide it in. Okay, and now we will repeat the process on this side. Now, to note, when we put these together, you will want to make sure that your other extrusion channel lines up with this side. And the reason behind that is it gives a little bit of room for error if it's not perfectly straightened and aligned, and it'll also help the seat slide much better. Now that we have the slide blocks attached, now it's time to screw them on. So we're going to take our 101 147s, take 4 of these, and you'll notice these are a screw. So this is going to be the only screws that come in with your hardware kit. Now note, when you look at your slide blocks, you'll notice on this side you'll have one side that is a smaller hole and one side that's a bigger hole. We are going to want to take the screw and put that through the bigger hole. Now also, you're not going to put your screws in on each side. If you notice, this side has the smaller hole, this one has the bigger. Now I'm going to flip around, and now your circular slide block has the bigger hole on this side, and we are going to attach it there, like so. And what you'll do is you will screw these in, and once these are screwed in to both, we can move on to the next step. So for the seat assembly, we are going to build one seat for you, but this will be the same process that you repeat for the second seat that's in your fish trap. For the next start of the seat assembly process, we've got our channels, and our slide blocks connected. Now we're going to take our swivel. And what you want to do with the swivel is you want to turn it into a star formation. So we're going to take it with our hands and just turn it until it looks like so. Then what we're going to do after that point is we're going to take our 106 286 Allen bolts and our 106 284 nuts and attach our channels to the swivel. So what I like to do with this process is flip it over. Your channel is going to sit underneath, so when you think about this, everything's going to be flipped upside down. We're going to take our screw, or our bolt, and we're going to add it in there. And what I like to do is, I don't like to do it all as fast as I can, but we're just going to get it at this point. We're not going to tighten anything down. We're just going to get the bolt and nut attached. And now what we're going to do from there is we're going to repeat our process all the way around. Now that we have them all attached, everything is still loose. We're going to once again double check to make sure we have everything assembled properly before we tighten down. You're going to want to make sure your ovals and your circular slide blocks are parallel with each other. Okay, so when you flip this over, it will look a little something like this. And from now that process, now that we know that we have everything set to where it's supposed to be, we can tighten down everything and move on to our next step. So once we have our base set up for our seat assembly, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the deluxe seat. So you're going to grab one of your deluxe seats, we're going to flip it over, and we are going to take our 101 470 and attach the swivel to the seat. Now you still have it in that star formation like I showed earlier, and now what we're going to simply do is line the holes up with the holes in the swivel. Okay, from there the process is pretty simple. You're going to want your 3/8 inch wrench or socket for this next process, and all we're going to simply do is put them in. Now what I like to do first is I like to hand tighten every single one of these in, and the reason I do that is because you know that you have it set where you want it, because when you put one in, this has some room to move. Now it doesn't really matter if it moves a little bit on you. That's not going to be the end of the world, but I just like to do this process because then I know I have it set where I want it. So real quick, we'll add the other 4, or the other 2. I'll just hand tighten those in real quick. Okay, and then I will use my socket for this process. Like I said, you can use a wrench or a socket, it does not matter, to get this part done. And now you will go into your star formation with it. Now, you don't need to go really tight on this, you just need to get it snug. So like so, like so. Now what I'll do is I'll spin it, and now finish the process. From there, our swivel, our base is now attached to the seat, and we can move on to the next part. So now that we've got the seat, we've got everything on it, we're going to move to the seat rail tubes. Now, quick tip for you, when these go in, they go in just fine. But sometimes, you know, they can be kind of hard to move. They slide very freely, but if you want to get a little bit more out of your tubes and your sliding, what we like to use is some type of a silicone spray. And what I will simply do is I will take myself a rag. It doesn't matter if it's a paper towel, whatever you have at home, just spray a little bit, just enough to get it wet. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly spin this and make sure that we get that silicone spray on all of them. From that point, this becomes very slick. So as you can see there, that runs pretty darn free through there. That's just a real quick tip if you want to get a little bit more added sliding capabilities out of your seat system. So now that we have our tubes inside of our slide blocks, we're going to now work on our front and rear retainer brackets. So here is your front retainer bracket. It doesn't matter on which side you start on with one of these because it all moves in the end so you can get it where you want it to go. But what we're going to look for on this retainer bracket is you're going to have one side that just has a hole drilled just for the size of the bolt itself. Then you're going to have another side that actually has an oversized hole that leads into the same exact hole that we saw on the other side. You're going to want this to be facing up for you in this process. So what we're gonna simply do is, we're gonna take these two holes, we're gonna line them up with the tube. We're gonna slide them on. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna line up the holes on the tube with the retainer bracket. Okay, so now once that's set, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our hammocks that we pulled out of our tent bag and our 106 456 bolts. You're gonna want 4 of these. Okay, and we're gonna attach this all. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these bolts and I'm going to slide them in. Okay, sometimes they may go in a little snug. That's not a bad thing at all. So it'll keep everything in place while you're working through this process. So got those 2 in. Okay, now we're gonna take our hammock and we're gonna attach it. Noted this here, when you put the hammock on, you wanna make sure that this strap right here faces down on the slide blocks. If you notice here, you have one side with the strap and one side without. When the hammock sits under this thing, it's going to look exactly like this. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it from looking like this and I'm gonna flip it over on top of it. Okay, so now from there, we've got 4 corners with holes, okay? So we're gonna take this, slide it through the notch, get it over the top of that bolt, okay? And then from that point on, now we can take our nut and tighten it on the top. Something I like to use is like a magnetic socket if you have one at home. It makes it very easy if you've got fat fingers like me. Otherwise, we'll show you both processes of how you can do this. So what I'll simply do is I'll just take that magnetic socket there, okay, and I will attach the nut inside of there. And what that's going to allow me to do is go through that top hole and just get it tightened down onto it. Now you don't need to go crazy. All we're doing at this point is just getting it on. We're just getting it snug. So now that side's done. And say you do not have something like this handy, you can just take your fingers and we'll make sure we do the same process right here as we did. Slide this through. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll take my fingers and I'll go underneath. Okay, do the best I can. I'll actually take my thumb, go into the insert hole up here to kind of keep it straight, and I'll just slowly just get it snug. Okay, now that was pretty simple. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna repeat the same step on the other side with a different, which is gonna be our rear retaining bracket. Now here's our rear retaining bracket. You can notice it's much different from the front retainer bracket, but one little quick tip to know which one is which is your clamp right here. So you will have that on here, and what this will do is this will connect your seat system to the seat rail of the fish house. So now what we're gonna do is we have our top side, okay, and then we have our bottom side. What I'm gonna want is I'm gonna want this bottom side right here, and that's how it's gonna go on. So we're gonna do the same process as in front. So I'm gonna line up these holes like so. So it will sit like that. We're gonna take our 2 Allen bolts, slide those in, like so. Now what we're gonna wanna do for this process is we will wanna grab some type of a pliers. A needle nose pliers I think works the best for this. And what it is these hammocks are meant to be tight on the bottom and they're not meant to be very loose. So sometimes you can just take your normal hand and you can stretch it enough where it will just slide right over the top of there like so. But other times, sometimes they may be a little bit tighter, so that's when this will come into hand. And what I'll do is simply take it, I will just grab onto the end of it, okay, and just pull. And it doesn't take much effort. So now that that's done, I can just take my 2 nuts and lightly tighten them on. Okay, now what we'll simply do after that, now that we have the assembly all put together how it should be, now we're going to tighten everything down. A little way of how I like to do it is I like to take the seat system, flip it over, What I'll actually do is I will push it as far forward as I can, and I will actually hang this off the edge of a table. Now what this is going to allow for me to do is it's just going to make things a lot easier. I like to use a impact if I can, but you can also use your Allen pieces as well. With the Allen wrench, or if you do have a T-handle style, remember this is a 5/32, you can use that as well and make the process easier. We'll also use our 7/16" wrench. So now what I'll do is I'll take this, go underneath, kind of hold it there, and I'm going to use this to tighten the process. Now what I tell people to do when they're tightening this is what I like to feel, and I'll show this to you, is I like to see a little bit of thread past the nylon lock nut. So if you can see there, I'll use my hand and it's about 1 thread past. You want to make sure you do that because that will allow this nylon lock nut to lock the bolt in place so it cannot back out on you. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to repeat the process all the way around. Now that we've got everything assembled on the seat side, it's time to put on the covers. So what we'll do is we're going to fold up our seat. We're going to have it sitting like we normally would. And what I like to do is I like to start with the bottom cushion first. There's no real right or wrong way that you have to do it. It's just that's how I like to start it. And what I'm going to do from there is take these Velcro pieces, straps, just undo them. We're going to push these through the back like so, because they will wrap around the underside of the seat here once we get everything done. And in the front, you're going to have kind of a little slot for it to slide into the front of the seat. So I'm going to get it in there. It's kind of tricky to do, so you just kind of maneuver it and work it a little bit, but it will go in very easily. So once we got that, give it a little push, get it where I like it. Now I can attach the straps. So a quick trick to do here, don't do it while the seat system's sitting like this. Have everything parallel and straight with each other like it would be sitting down, so you're going to have a little bit of room to work with here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that strap is flat and not twisted. Go underneath, find your loop, and just simply tighten it down. Very easy process to do here. This is probably the easiest part about this entire seat system. And we'll just go back, do the same thing real quick. Find it here, just like so. Tighten it down. The bottom's done. Now we're going to repeat that same exact process for the back seat cushion. So from there, same deal, same process. Gonna slip it over the top here. Get it where we want it. I'm going to take my straps, pull them back behind me, and then what we will do from there is tighten them down. Don't need to go crazy on it, just enough to get it put in place. Now, one more reminder, now that we're finished up with the seat assembly process, I showed you one. Okay, and your next seat is going to be assembled the exact same way. So if you have any questions or thoughts of how to do it or can't remember something, just rewind the video here and go through the process again. It'll be the exact same way. So now that we're done with the seats, let's move on to the fish house. Moving on to the extension pole. So with the extension pole, it is going to be the shortest hoop pole that you have, and it is also going to be identified by a lime green clip. Zip tie on there. And then you will want one of your regular hoops. And how you can identify that one is you're going to see a smaller hole on top of the bigger hole. That is where your hinge clamp is going to be attached to on this process. You're going to have your straight canopy poles for your extension. Okay. Your hinge clamps. Hardware will be included within that. You'll see that they're already tied into it. And then also, we're going to need our RPS X collars for this process as well. So we've got everything set out in front of us. What we're going to first do is we're going to start with our hinge clamps. We're going to get those set on. One thing to note, on this hinge clamp, as you can see, this is routed on the inside for the nut. Okay, so when you go to do this, you're not going to need a 3/8 or a 7/16 inch wrench. It is actually going to just sit in there like so. And when you go to tighten down, that will lock it in place. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our hinge clamps on. Now, you want that bolt side, the nut side, to be facing inward. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, make sure this side's inward, and I'm going to go underneath those 2 holes I was speaking of. We're going to stretch this out. Okay, and now I've got 2 notches on the inside of here. I'm going to move it around until you hear that clip into place. Now this thing's into place. We're going to repeat that process on the other side. Next, we're going to attach our extension pole. Okay, so this is our straight pole. One thing to note, and this will go for all of our canopy poles that we have, is this notch needs to be facing inward. This is what's going to connect the RPSX clip with the extension hoop pole to keep it in place. So simply put, we're going to put it in like this. Just keep it straight. Okay, and what I like to do is I like to take my screw and I like to put it through so it gets through everything. Now it's not going to push through the other side, but we want to get a starting point to keep everything in place. Then from there, I'm going to take a number 2 Phillips, like you can use a drill or you can use a regular Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to take the nut and I'm going to place it inside, take my pointer finger, hold on to it, and then slowly tighten it down. Now that should move free in motion, just like so. You don't want it too tight, but you don't want it loose at the time. You want it to be nice and snug. So with that, we're going to repeat the process on the other side, and we'll be ready for the next step. So now that we've gotten the straight canopies put on the extension there, we're going to go to the hoop extension. Now, like I said, your hoop extension pole is going to be identified by the lime green zip tie. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut that off because we no longer need it. And then we're going to move on to the RPSX collars. Okay, so if you notice here, RPSX collar on the inside, you're going to see that tab or that button. That's going to want to be pushed in. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll just kind of close it with their hands. What I actually like to do is pull it out and turn sideways. So now you can see that it's not in the way of anything. It's very easy to put on. So from that point, we're going to want to make sure when we put this onto the pole that this tab on the inside here is going to actually go inside of the pole itself. And that's going to keep this RPSX collar in place on the pole. So we're going to take it, we're going to insert it on there. And if you notice that tab stopped there with the knob, we're going to push that in, and then we're going to push forward. And you want that knob on the tab to go into the hole on the hoop extension. Now this is in place and it's not going anywhere. Once we have our RPSX collars connected to our hoop extension, now we're just going to put it on. It's very simple. Help it guide itself on there a little bit, just like so. I like to put it in just a little bit just to hold it in place, and then what I'll do is I'll walk to the other side and I'll add that part as well. So now that it's there, what I can do is come to the center of this and just simply push in. Now our extension piece is connected to it, and now we can move on to the next step with the assembly of the tub. Now we're moving on to the tub, and one quick thing I want to talk about before we get started on this. Before you get started assembling the base of your fish house, if you have a runner kit or any accessories of anything in that shape or form, this would be the time to do it now before you assemble everything, especially with the runner kits. When you do these runner kits, it's a lot easier to do it with just the tub itself rather than to get everything put on and then do it after that. So just remember that when you're building the house, if you do have a runner kit that you were putting on, make sure you put that on first before you do anything else. And now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble the rail support. So what your rail support is that big long black rail, okay? And what we're going to need is this. We're going to need the rail support brackets, okay? And we're also going to go back to the same Allen bolts and nuts that we were using, the 106-286 and the 106-284. And we're going to use these for our rail support brackets to attach them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble our rail support brackets to the tub. If you look, you've got 2 holes identifying right here. Okay, this is going to be in the middle of your base. And what we are going to do is we're going to take our 106-286s. This is our Allen bolts that we were talking about. We're going to insert those. I like to do this first. It makes things a little bit easier. Then I'll take my fingers and I'll just hold on to those bolts so they stay in like so. We are then going to add it in. Now make sure that this hole right here, this piece is standing straight up. Otherwise, a way you can identify it is the number of the part number on the inside of here will start at the bottom and end at the top. So then what we'll do from there is we'll take our nylon lock nuts, okay, and we'll add, I like to go the top one first. It just keeps it from falling over, so when you do the first one up top there and get it tightened in, it can no longer pull out. So then this bolt is not going to, because if you start down here, the front end's going to fall out and you're going to lose your Allen bolts and you're going to have to do it again. So now we'll do that. We'll get that snug into place. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back. We're going to grab our 5/32, either T-handle Allen wrench or the Allen wrench that comes in with the hardware kit, our 7/16 inch wrench, and we're going to tighten it down. Now that we've got our brackets on, now we're going to work on the rail support. So we have our rail support ends. These are the plugs. These are a 101-430. We're going to insert these on each side of the rail support. Now to note, there is a notch taken out. Okay? That notch needs to line up with this hole on the rail support. And when you're doing these rail supports, you want to make sure this hole is facing down. So this is how it'll actually sit. And then what we'll do is simply take that notch end, match up with that, line it up. Sometimes you got to give her a little, slide it right into place. And we'll do that for the same here. Really simple. Same thing. Line up the notch, put it right into place. All right, and from that point on, the process gets pretty easy. What we'll do now is we're going to take this hole and we're going to line it up with these notches in the inside. And what I'll do is I'll start on one side, just like so, lay it in there so everything's evened up, and then we will take our 106-456, we'll have 2 of these Allen bolts. These are a little bit longer. We used these earlier on the seats, and we're going to take 2 of these, and the Allen head side is going to face towards me. And how I say that is the front of the house. And you're going to identify the front of the house by these 3 holes right here. These are the 3 holes that we'll discuss later on where your pole bracket's going to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm just going to slide it through. Okay, so once that side's in, now I can move over to this side. Now this side, you may have to maneuver it a little bit. It's not going to be too bad. So as you can see, it's just off by a hair. And what's nice about these tubs is we can flex things. So with very little effort to no effort, I put it right in place where it needs to be. Now I can repeat that process like I did over there. Get that on the inside, and then we'll take our 106-284 nuts, and we will add 1 to each side. So just like so, I'll put it in, tighten it down. That side's done. We'll repeat the process on the other side. Now once that's all in place, now we can tighten these down and we can move on to the next step. We got the rail support on, everything's tightened down, good to go. Now we're going to move on to our pole assembly. So what we're first going to do and need for this process is we're going to need our pole brackets. We're going to need our straight canopy poles. We are also going to need our bent canopy poles. So now simply put, we're going to take all the plastic off of it and get going at it. So when you get that off, this is what you're going to be looking at. It's a very simple deal. You're going to have the 3 holes right here. And where that's going to rest is on these 3 holes we had talked about earlier when mounting your rail support. So we'll get at that right now. We've got everything out of the package. We're going to start on our pole system. Now we're going to start with our mounting bracket. And for this, we're going to be using the same Allen bolts that we were using, the 106 286s. We're going to need 3 of them. And we're going to simply put them up on top like here. That's what I like doing. I like adding them all right away. So everything's in place. You can see them down nice and neat on below. Now I'm going to take this to these 3 holes right here in the front of this bracket. And I'm actually going to take my fingers, like you're playing guitar, hold on to those, and just slip it right in. So very, very simple. So from that point on, now that that's sitting there in place, we're going to take our lock nuts that we've been using, and we are going to attach those and just get them snug on there. So one tip for these when you're doing them, what I like to do is I like to start with the farthest bolt going back. I like to tighten that down first, because once you get that tight, you're going to need to adjust this bracket a little bit. It's not going to just fall right into place. So once I get that in there tight where I want it, now I'm going to go to look at the front here, and I'm going to make sure I am straight with the tub. So that looks good. Now I can move forward to the next 2 and get those tightened down. We got our pole brackets on. Now we're going to start the assembly process of the poles. We're going to start with the bent pole, okay? You're going to know that by it obviously being bent, but then also it's not going to matter how you put this one on the mounting bracket, since it is notched on both sides. As you notice, you can see me right through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our Allen bolt, and we're going to simply do this. Now mind you, we want the Allen bolt side facing the outside of the house. This is where your tent's going to be rubbing. So we want to make sure that that's on the outside, so you do not have the bolt sticking out like this and then cause damage to your tent. Okay, so now what we'll do from there is we'll go to this bottom notch right here, slide that in, find the hole, and we're good to go right there on that part. Now we're going to repeat that process. Now we're going to our straight poles, okay? And one thing you're going to notice, and it's very particular of how you put this on, is you'll have a notch side, and then you will not have a notch side. You'll have a closed end. You want to make sure the notch side of this pole is facing in towards the house. This is where your RPSX clip's going to connect into and keep everything in place. So I like to start with the back one. I think it's much easier. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that notch side's facing in. I will lay it like that. I'll grab my Allen bolt, and we will just put it right through. Sometimes you got to wiggle it around to find the other end. There we go. Now we'll do the same thing one more time. We'll lay that one on top. I'm going to make sure my notch end's facing in and put that right through. And then from there, what we can do is tighten down this system. Now there's a little note to this that I'm going to show you, that you want to get these tight, but you want them to stay loose at the same time, okay? So you kind of got to be a little tedious on how you tighten these and making it, because the last thing we want is this to be loose and be doing this, okay? But we also don't want it to be so tight that it will do something similar. So I'll show you a little example on this pole right here. So we're going to tighten it all the way down. I'm going to get it really tight, okay? Okay, so now I got it tight. And as you notice, it's just sitting there. You have to move it yourself. And we don't want that. So what I do at that point is I get it tight, and I'll lift it up a little bit so it's sitting in the air. And then I will slowly back off the bolt until it falls freely, but stays just like that. So if you notice, it fell freely on its own. I have range and motion to move this wherever I want. It falls, but it's tight as well. So it's not sloppy on the inside of there. So what you'll want to do is when you tighten these bolts down, you just want to make sure you tighten them down all the way and then come back to them again to loosen them up. And like I said, the way to identify if you've got it loose or not is by holding that pole there. And if it falls freely down on its own and is still tight on the inside, you're good to go. Now we've finished up with the pole system. Now it's time to attach the hoop assembly to the house. And from that point, we're almost done. We're ready to go fishing. So with that, we're gonna go back to like I had spoke to with the extension and the RPSX collars. So if you remember what I said, pull this out to get that knob out of the way, turn it sideways. That'll keep it all there. And then we wanna make sure that this tab goes on the inside of the hoop assembly. So go on there just like that. I'll slide it on all the way to where the tab sits. Push that tab down, pop it in, make sure that the knob and the notch taken out of the hoop pole meet each other. And then what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna repeat that process on this side. Okay, so we'll grab one more. And we will add that onto there. And you're gonna repeat this process for all of your hoop poles until you are ready to put them all in the fish house. RPSX collars are on the hoops. Let's get this thing put into motion. So what we're gonna do here is generally this job, it's gonna take 2 people to do, but I'm gonna show you how I do it by myself. That makes it a lot easier. Builds up a little muscle strength too while you're at it. So what you're gonna wanna do is connect on to the straight canopy poles. So we're gonna wanna start at the bottom, okay? So what I'm actually gonna do is I take this pole and I rest this curve right here, right into my elbow, going into the back side of my arm. And what I'm doing right there is I'm holding it here in place. So I'm just gonna walk up to this, I'm gonna pull this one up, but put this one up, and just kind of slide it on. Now you notice with the RPSX collars, I still have that tab out, okay? I'm doing that because it's making it very easy for me to install these. So what I'll do now is I'll walk over to this side, and I will repeat that same process. Okay, get it on like that. So once that's like that, now I'm gonna go to the middle of this house, and what I do is I just kind of slightly tap on it to get these poles put in place. So now that first one's done. Now, the next one that we need to put on is the extension that we worked on at the beginning of this video. Your extension is gonna be the next one. And the way we want that on is we want our extension piece right here facing up, okay? So this is gonna be, your regular hoop pole is going to be the one that actually goes into here, onto the straight pole. So I'm gonna repeat the same process. This one's a little bit heavier, but it's not bad. So I'll just kind of lean it on there to make it easy. I'll get that slid on there like that. Lay it down to that side. Come around here. And then I will slide that on. And I will repeat that same exact process with this going through to here. So then we'll slowly just kind of tap on it. And once in a while, you know, if you get one side that goes in a little bit farther than the other right off the bat, you just got to do a little bit of maneuvering to get it started. So as you can see, I'm just kind of shaking it a little bit. And once we get closer where it centers, it'll slide right on. Okay, so now we have our last hoop pole to put on, but we're gonna wait on that actually for a minute because we're gonna need this hoop pole when we do the tent. So what I'm actually gonna do with these RPSX clips is I'm gonna pop one off, I'm gonna put it in the house, and when we move on to the tent process, you'll see why I did that in a moment here. But from there on, we've got the whole assembly of the frame done. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk around, we're gonna just put these all back into place like so, just like that. Now everything's in place, everything's in order, and now what we can do is we can put the seats in, and the next step after that is gonna be the tent. So now that we've got our frame assembly all done on the fish house, we're gonna put the seats in. Very simple how to do these. What you're gonna wanna do is, like I talked earlier, you're gonna have your front retaining bracket and your rear retaining bracket. Now remember when I mentioned your rear retaining bracket is gonna have this clip here. This is what's gonna connect your seat to the rail support. So how we put these on is I simply find the little notch here like this, and we're gonna wanna put it on the lip of the tub. So if you notice there, lip of the tub like so, we're gonna lean it back, put it onto there, and then what we'll do, sometimes they'll go straight on, sometimes they'll be like this, but all you do is simply just lay it down like that. We take this clip, place it up, go into these 2 top holes right here, Push those in. Now our seat assembly is on, sliding forward and back, and ready to rock and roll, and it's not gonna go anywhere. And then at the end of the night, when you're done fishing, you're gonna repeat that process and take it out, unclip that like that, lift up, forward, and then you can just lay it right in the hot tub itself. So what I like to do is put it down, get that flat, and then our seats are sitting right in the bottom side of our tub. So pretty simple, pretty effective, and we're gonna do that for both seats. All right, we're ready to put the tent on the fish house. So before we do this though, the biggest thing you want is you wanna have a flat surface. I like an elevated table. You can definitely use the floor, but the surface has to be flat, and you wanna make sure of that. If it's off by an inch, if it's in or up or down by an inch, it's gonna make all the difference in the world when you get done setting your tent from when you actually get it on the ice. So first thing we're gonna do though, before we get into any of that, is we're gonna grab a 5 to 6 gallon bucket. We're gonna fill it up with just about boiling water. I'd say fill it up about 3/4 full. You wanna put as much water in as you can, because A, it's gonna stay warmer longer, and B, you're gonna be able to get all the U channel in there. So with the U channel, what we use here at Clam is I actually use something we call it a hot box. And what this is basically just a box with a blanket and a heater inside, because we do multiple fish houses in a day. We do 50 to 60 built units in one day, so we need to always have a bunch of them warm and ready to rock and roll so we can push through them. But for you, very simple. Take your U channel, get it as tight as you can, like this. Dump it in the boiling water or the hot water. Push it down. I like to get it down all the way on the bottom. And at this point, we can just let it sit and simmer in there. You got to think of it as like a mouth guard. So when you're trying to fit a mouth guard, you put it in that warm water, and that's how you can form it to your teeth to get it to fit right. So think of it as the same way as that U channel. So first thing we're going to do though, before we assemble the tent, is we're going to put the rope on. It's very easy. You've got two sides to this house. One side's going to have 2 holes. They're kind of hiding down here. And there's 2 holes right here. This is where the tent's gonna, the rope is going to go. So I'm gonna push that over, push it through. All we're gonna do is make a knot. Doesn't need to be a fancy one. Pull it together, leave some slack. You wanna have a little bit of cushion there, so if it does slip a little bit on you, I'll pull it tight, and then what I'll do is just kind of hit it hard there, and that'll actually cinch it down for you so you don't have to worry about it falling out. So, and then we'll repeat that same exact process on this side. Pull it through. Clamp it down like that. Do that same thing. So then when I'm done, what I do for storage to myself, so I don't trip over it or wreck it, I just tie a little knot in there. And then it sits on the inside of that. So now that we've got that portion done, first thing we're gonna do here is we will pull this back, and what I'm gonna actually do is I'm gonna get all these poles extended besides the extension. So all I'm doing is pulling back, clicking them into place. Okay, and now I'm gonna take this one, the whole extension, click that into place. I'm going to leave this one collapsed. And the reason I am going to do that is because if I open it up now, it's way back here, and I need to get to these poles for the assembly with the Velcro. So we'll leave that just like that, and we'll get back to that in a second here. Now that we got the tent out, we're going to do this a little bit different from what you've always heard. So in the past, what most people will do is they will extend all the poles. They will set it up with spreader poles or whatever, what have you, and they will drape the tent over the top. I'm going to show you a little bit easier way that we do this here. So what we do is we roll her out, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the back of the tent. So, or the back of the fish house. And a way you can tell what the front and the back is from halfway in the house around to the front, there's going to be a skirt, just like this. And you're going to see it, it shows up a little bit better with the blue. But you're going to see that skirt there. The rear of the house is not going to have that skirt, okay? So all I'm going to do is just unfold this. Okay, I have located the area of interest, which is this right here, and this is going to show me that this is the rear. As you can see, there is no skirt there compared to here, where there is a skirt. So there's no skirt here. I know that this is the rear of the house. And one other way to identify it is your door and 2 windows. So now that I've got that like that, I'm gonna go to the inside of it. I'm gonna grab right here, and I'm just gonna flip it out. Okay. Now that we've got that done, now we've got the first part, so we don't unfold the whole thing like that, but what we have here is we've got our Clam logo. Okay, that's what sits right at the back of your head in the fish house when you're sitting fishing. A way to identify that you're in the rear of the house is the Velcro straps. So if you notice, these two are separated from each other. They're skinnier. That's how you know that this is your center, because the rest of them will look something like this. Okay, so now that we've identified that the tent is, we have the rear of it, I'm gonna pick everything up, we're gonna move to the back, and we're gonna get set on there. So now that we're at the back of the house, I've got the tent flipped inside out. I've got the Clam logo showing. I've got the 2 straps right here that I need. Okay, and so what we wanna do is we want to attach this with the Clam logo facing forward, because you gotta think about it that it's gonna be at the back of your head. So that's how we're gonna set this up. So first thing I'm gonna do is start it off right here. We're just gonna do that 1.
Loose.
And then 2, we wanna keep these loose. Reason being is we need them to move around as easily as they can. So from that point on, we're gonna move on to the next one here. And all we're gonna simply basically do is repeat this entire process all the way up to the last pull. So keeping that one really loose again. We have 1 more here. Keep that loose, and if you want to know what I mean by loose, go into like a 1/4 or like a 1/2 inch into it. You don't need to add too much strap onto it. Velcro, you just want to get it on there. That's the whole point of it. Because if you have it too tight, you're going to run into a lot of problems where things could rip. They're not going to set properly. So you want to have as much movement as possible in this. So now what I'm going to do is simply I'm just going to follow my 2 straps, follow them right down the center, and that's going to lead me into the next set. So now we're going to do this one. Now that we've got the second set up, now we're going to follow down. There's our cargo net. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to follow straight back. And when we follow straight back, we find our last set of Velcro here. So we're just going to add that up on the top there. Now that we've got all the Velcro on the 3 poles, now we're going to get to the porch pole portion of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for the seams here. Okay, so now I've located 1 seam. You can see it very easily. It's right next to the front window, so very easy to find. Your next seam is going to be by the other window. Otherwise, you can look at it from the tags that are on it, because the tags are sewn into that seam. So we're going to stretch it out, and we're going to drape it over. And what I mean by draping over is the front here. So if you're going to see, notice here as I get it set, I got a bunch of loops here. Okay, so I've actually got 1 here on the side, 1 here, 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 and then 1 more on the side. This is where our porch pole is going to go through. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is grab the porch pole. We're going to slide that through, and we'll just about be done. Remember, I kept the 1 RPSX clip off, and I kept the 1 on. We're going to use the one that does not have the clip to guide us through it. So I'm going to start by coming through this part. Okay. Next, I'm going to run through here, and I'm basically just going to work through all these. And as you go, you're going to want to start pulling it up with you, because you're eventually going to crunch it all together where it's going to leave you little room to move. So pull through that. Go through there. Okay. Now we're going to slide everything out. So we've got everything pretty much centered. And what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna come over here, kind of work things together a little bit. Sometimes you gotta move a little. There we go. Pull the clamp down. That side's in. Then I'm gonna grab my last clip. Come over here, and I'm gonna repeat the same thing. All right. So now that I got that, that's all in place. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna do the Velcro. So you got 2 on the corners, and then you've got 1 up front, right here. So we're gonna make sure those get attached. Once again, keep them loose. Do not go tight on them. We've got everything attached. We got all the Velcro attached. Now what we're gonna do is extend that extension pole that I was telling you about. So what you kind of got to do here is you kind of got to work the material a little bit to get it over there. I'm just gonna move it around and it will come out just fine. So there we go. We've got everything in place. Now I'm gonna move this tub back as far as I can, which is perfect right there. So now at this point, what's gonna happen is Mark and I are going to flip this tent and flip it over. So we're gonna grab all the poles at once. We're gonna bring it so it's vertical. And then from that point on, we'll start with the front porch pole, fold that over, and then so on and so forth. So if you have 2 people, it makes this job a little bit easier. You can definitely do it by yourself, but having 2 just makes the job go a little bit slicker. So here we go, 1, 2, 3, lift it. We're gonna find it right in the vertical in the middle. Now we're gonna start with the first one. Okay, kind of work it in there. And everything else is just gonna kind of fall right into place. Okay. And then from that point on, I'm going to clamp it. I'll clamp it one more time here. There we go. Now the tent's set. Now from this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna inspect it. I'm gonna clean it off a little bit. See, it got a little dirty. We're in the warehouse, so it's not gonna be perfect right away, but that'll easily spray off. Okay, and I'm gonna make sure everything is set how it should be. What I like to do here is I like to hit the front of it, and what that's doing is if there's any excess material that is rolled back, it'll roll it forward. So you saw after I actually did that it collapsed a little bit more. So from this point on, what I'm gonna do is I'll clean up the tent, and we can move on to setting it and getting it prepared for the U-channel. So we've went around, we've looked at the house, I've got everything adjusted as far as the seams go and everything. With the seams, you wanna have them close to the center in the corner, if not as close as possible, because we wanna get this tent as straight as possible. But when we go to adjust this tent to make sure that the hoop pole is touching the ground, as you notice here, this one's a little high right now, okay? You're not supposed to be able to do that. So what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna go to the back and I'm going to adjust this. Now, when it comes down to this, one of the biggest questions that we get is how much extra material should we have? And the answer is there isn't one. It could be 2 inches, it could be 4 inches, it could be 3 inches, it doesn't really matter. As long as your porch pole is hitting the ground, that's all that matters. So what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna loosen this one side. I'll get the other side down a little bit too here quick. So we'll get that side loosened up. Now we'll work over here. So as you can see, everything fell down. So where I'm at right here, if I have it up, right there is perfect. You saw it touch the table. That's great. If we have it too low to where I've got a lot of slack sitting right there, okay? There's a lot of slack, you can see it. I am going to lift it to where it pulls it out of there. So I feel pretty good about that right there. I'm gonna come over to the other side, just double check it one more time. You can actually see here that I've got a little slack I gotta make up for. So we'll get that tight. Everything looks good. I'm gonna clamp that into place, and at this point, I'm ready to put on the U-channel. So now we've got the U-channel in hand. We've got our screws for the U-channel right here. And we've got our drill. So you're gonna make sure you want a number 2 Phillips, okay, with a magnetic adapter to it. That's just gonna keep the screw in there a lot easier, especially if you're doing it yourself. So we've got the sides clamped down still. Now all we're doing is we're finding the center here. So I'm gonna put this together like that. Now I know those are evened out. So when I go to here, everything's centered. Find the center of the house. Basically on the Yukon, you can just run right up the zipper and you'll be okay. So, and it really doesn't matter if you hit perfectly in the center, but I like to get it the best I can there. So now that I've got that there, I'm gonna take my first screw and I'm gonna go dead center of the U channel. I don't wanna go too low and I don't wanna go too high and I don't wanna go in too far. So after I've got that set, now what I can do is I can work this thing around. So now I'm gonna open it up with my fingers, just like that. And I am going to work this U channel all the way around the house. And after you get started there, you can kind of just roll it on there and it goes. But once we get to this corner, we're gonna really wanna open this thing up. So we'll almost open it like that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna push in with it. And what that's gonna do is just wrap it right around this corner. So once we do that, we can just keep rolling again. Get the U channel on. Once in a while, you might need to do something like that just to kind of, if the temp material starts to get overboard, and we'll put that all the way on. So once I get that on, I get them on all the way around. What I'm gonna do is take my fingers and go on the inside here and just kind of push and get everything set in place, especially when you hit this corner, because it's gonna want to crinkle right here. So when you take your hands and kind of move it around and mold it, it's gonna be perfect, set and ready to rock and roll. So from that point on, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish this side real quick and we'll work on getting it cut and then we'll be able to put the screws in. Now we're gonna cut 8 inches from the back of the mounting bracket. So if you look here, there's the mounting bracket. You can see it around my hand. I'm gonna find the back of it, which is right here. Okay, and what I like to do is I like to measure 8 inches. So 8 inches from here to here, that's for me. What we'll do is we'll go right to the back of it and I'll measure out 8 inches. So now I found my 8. And what I'll do at that point is let go, remember it, go in, pull it down, because you don't want to cut into it, into the tent, and clip that off, and then just slide it back on. And we'll do that same thing for the other side. We've got the U channel cut. All we're ready to do now is put the screws in and call it a day. So, got our screws. Doesn't really matter how you do it. You don't need to go crazy on it and use every single screw that comes in the package either. I like to go between, depending on the house, 6 to 10 inches between screws. So with this house, with the Yukon, I'm gonna probably wanna go around 10. I don't need it to be too crazy from there. So I'm gonna say that's about 10. Put that one in. And when you're doing this, you don't wanna go too far in. You don't need to go overboard because you don't wanna push through the U channel. And just remember that that screw is through the U channel, the tent, and the tub. So that's more than enough. And when we get to the corner here, what we want to do is we want to do one on the outside. I'm going to do one into the center. I'm not going to hit the seam, but I'm going to go one in the center and then one on the outside again. So I'll go right there. All right. And after that, I'll find the center here. I'm going to say that that's that. Put that one in. And then finish it off just in front of where we cut. There we go. Now I got this side done. I'm gonna finish the other one. We'll fit this thing packer down. You'll be ready to go fishing. So what we're gonna do here at this point is we're gonna collapse the house. What you will wanna do on the inside is to make sure to Velcro all the sides. So you're gonna have a Velcro piece for your 45, one coming down, and one for the rear. You can actually see where they're stitched here. So you want to make sure that you connect those and make sure those are loose. They cannot be tight. You need those to move around very easily because you got to think you're collapsing poles, extending poles, flipping. So that tent's going to need to move as best as it can. So we're going to come on the inside here. We're going to collapse it down. So we're going to start from the rear pole, push in the clip, and slide it right down. We're going to come to the center, push in the clip, slide it right down. We're gonna move to that 45, slide it right down. And now we're at the last and final one. Push that, slide it on down. So when we go to put it away, what I like to do is get all the material and fold it up on the inside. That way you have nothing dragging. Everything's nice and neat. I'll come around to the back and even do the same there. Just kind of make sure everything's set in place. And that's that. So I want to say thank you for purchasing your Yukon XT lineup of fish houses from Clam Outdoors. This is Mike Raetz. We'll see you on the ice.